Welcome to The Shield Within. The issues discussed on the Shield Within podcast do not reflect the opinions of any specific agency. They are the views of the host and the guest. Any persons discussed may be fictional for comedic purposes only. This podcast is rated explicit and listener discretion is advised. Listening to The Shield Within may trigger repressed or suppressed memories or experiences. Please contact a mental health professional at your earliest convenience. It's time for the chaos to cease.
Time to open yourself to peace.
From the hours you've put in.
To the next shift you begin.
From the endless pursuit of release.
That finds the worst unleashed.
Transform the ugly into a win.
Get to know your shield within.
Welcome to The Shield Within.
Welcome.
You're on the air right now with Ricardo Martinez from the Within the Trenches podcast. Did I say that correctly? Oh, we had a freeze up. Are you there, sir?
Anyway, there you are.
There we are. I just thought you got mad and said, fuck you guys.
There we are. No. See, and I thought you were waiting when you froze. All the last thing I heard was from the, and then you froze, and I looked down at the screen and I thought, oh, maybe he's waiting for me to say the name.
So I did. Anyway.
I said the name.
Ricardo Martinez from Within the Trenches podcast.
Yes.
And
hello. Thank you for having me.
So you just got two of us today. I mean, historically with the Shield Within, we've been blasting away with a whole room full of people. And as we're recording this, we're just coming off the high of having 6 people in the studio, which that was fun. Mm-hmm. And we had Mr. Scott Medlin with us here. So that was also a good time to have him here as well. So
right.
Let's do a little business here, then we're going to jump in. So if you're on Facebook, we know all you old bastards are because I do the demographics once a month. Check us out at Facebook /The Shield Within. You can go to our website and see our smiling faces in the Hedgehog Donnie at www.theshieldwithin.com. So if you are in need, we know that Dr. David is a nationwide therapist. You can reach out to him by just simply hitting the coaching button, or you can go to lessonslearnedcoaching.com and reach out to him there. So everybody likes to refer to him as Master Yoda, which he is. He kept me alive through my early days. But how far away is your farthest client now, Dr. Dave?
New Hampshire.
Good Lord, that's a new one.
New Hampshire to Kansas. Yes,
Dr. David is a first responder. Is it certified?
Oh, no. I'm just some dude hanging out, man.
But anyway, he handles first responders. So, you know, the thing is with a lot of therapists, if they are not first responders savvy, how about that? We say that.
Right.
You will go in and fuck up their world.
Yes, that's my job.
So, you know, so let's get into this. You have Within the Trenches podcast. How long you been on the air, or how long you been sharing your wonderful show with the world?
So I've been doing this for over a decade now. The podcast actually, everything that I do started from a college project that I did actually back in 2010.
No kidding.
And it all started from my own struggle in dispatch. Mm-hmm. It was from, taking all kinds of phone calls, right? Anything that you can think of, I was taking, but nobody was talking about it. Like, we weren't really talking. We would just take the call and you go to the next one. You don't get a chance to get up sometimes to go and decompress. You just go to that next one. If you get a chance, you get to go back to that, what we call the quiet room, which I just said the Q word. So now everything's going to go to hell for everybody who's listening to this now.
Sorry, everyone.
Yeah. I apologize.
Yeah.
But, it started there. I would come home and, of course I would talk with my wife and stuff, but she doesn't come from public safety. So it was a little hard for us to communicate in the sense of me sharing these hard stories with her, where then, we end up at a cookout with a bunch of the officers and other dispatchers that I work with, and I'm sharing all these funny stories. And I remember my wife slapping me on the arm and saying, "How come you don't share those stories with me?" she's like, you're giving me all the hard ones. I'm like, that's all I have at the moment. So what I ended up doing though, which was kind of, I learned the hard way, was really that I started burying those calls. I thought I was leaving it at home, or at work. I mean, like a lot of people say, I leave it at work. I don't think about it. But we all know in a way, in a sense, that's bullshit, because what ends up happening, right? You end up going home and you're distant. You're not there. You're there, but you're not there. And there's other things that's going on, right? Like for me, I've got that dispatch ear, and I've been out of dispatch now 10 years, but I still have that dispatch ear where I would go home. I would be talking to my wife or my kids or whichever, but I'm also hearing what's on TV. I can hear what's going on outside. I can smell what's being cooked for dinner or whatever. I've got all of this that's going on because that's how I'm trained. And then I get back to who I'm talking to, and they're like, are you even paying attention? And then I repeat everything that they said. It's like, how do you do that? I'm trained. so there's good and bad, right? But I was trying to figure out some sort of outlet, some way, because during this time as well, I was going through, a burnout stage, and I was trying to, I loved what I was doing, but there were so many things that were just destroying it. Low morale there in dispatch because we were so short staffed, which is everywhere right now, right? It has been like that for years. But then you throw in county politics and all these other things that are going on, and it was just horrible. So I ended up going back to school. Believe it or not, I went back to college, and thank you. I ended up getting 3 different degrees while I was dispatch.
Okay.
Well, I did everything online. So in between phone calls, I'm doing classwork. But what ended up changing everything for me was that the job that I felt like was kind of killing me in the sense inside, mentally and such, which, then leads to, physical issues as well. Right. It actually saved me. And the reason I say that is because a lot of these big projects that I was doing was all about dispatch. Because in the beginning, I would, even if I go to get my hair cut, they want to make small talk. What do you do for a living? And then I'm sitting there thinking, do I say what I do? Because I know what they're going to ask. What is the craziest call you've ever taken?
Yeah.
And for me at the time, I thought, damn, I was almost annoyed a little bit thinking, why do you want me to relive that shit? But then I thought, you know what? As humans, we're just naturally curious. They just want to know because people don't really know. So instead of getting that way, why not switch that mindset to public education and help people understand what it is that we actually do, but more importantly, why we do it. That when I'm on the phone and I'm asking you all of these questions, that the amount of questions that I'm asking does not delay the time of people responding to you.
Right.
But, and also at the same time, if my voice is just an even tone the whole time and it sounds like I'm emotionless,
right,
in the back of my mind, I'm freaking out just like you are, caller.
Oh, yeah.
But it's my job.
Oh, yeah.
It's my job to remain calm, to keep you calm, to get as much information as I can for the people that are heading there to help you. So that's where it all started, man. And so I'm in school. I'm now in my 2nd degree. It's my bachelor's of graphic design, and we had a digital storytelling class. And I had already been playing with the idea of sharing stories because what I was doing was I was writing them down.
Oh, okay.
And it was therapeutic for me to write down my stories. And I remember I told my deputy director what I was thinking of doing because I was going to start blogging and putting it out there.
Right.
And she goes, "No, you don't do it because we don't want to get sued." And I said, "Well, I was a part of that call as well, and I'm only sharing my part of it." And she goes, "Yeah, we probably still shouldn't." Now, at the time, I was supervisor there. And I was bummed, man. I was crushed. I thought, man, I had this great idea. I thought it was going to be good. And now I'm not going to be able to do it. And then light bulb moment.
Bing.
I ended up remembering something. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Where's that sound effect?
Here we go. Didn't come through. Yeah.
So I will go back into her office and I said, I have a quick question for you. And she goes, yes. And I said, didn't you guys tell us at our supervisor meeting last week that you can't regulate our feelings online and social media? And she goes, yes. And I said, thank you. That's all I needed. And she goes, you're going to do it anyway, aren't you? And I said, you're damn right.
Darn right.
I said, this needs to happen.
Yeah.
So I started writing about them. And then that digital storytelling project comes up. And I had a couple of my coworkers. I asked them if they would help me with this. And they said, of course, what do you need? And I said, I'm going to take still pictures of you here in dispatch, or, everyday life, if you have some pictures to be able to show that aspect of it as well.
Yeah.
And all I want to do is record a snippet of your story. I want to know how you got into dispatch, your worst call, your best call, and why you do what you do. And when I did that and put it all together, it was called Stories from the Trenches, or Behind the Mic Stories from the Trenches is what it was called in the beginning. And I submitted it. And my professor and my classmates were blown away because the biggest thing that they were saying was, we had no idea. We thought you just answered the phone.
Yeah.
They're like, we just thought you answered the phone and that was it. I'm like, hell no. There's way more to it.
Yes.
And so once that happened, I thought, man, I have really got something here, because there were a lot of different stories that I had and that I wanted to share. And again, it was therapeutic. Then we get to my master's program in 2012, new media journalism, and they introduced us to podcasting. And I fell in love with that form of storytelling. And I thought, if I can get other dispatchers to come on and share their stories, or anybody else in public safety or whatever, to help everyone understand what it is that we do, but again, more importantly, why we do it.
Right.
Maybe it would not only be therapeutic for them and others listening, but the public would learn as well. And it just exploded from there. Yeah. But there were all of these things that happened that built up to what I do today. I mean, for example, I started my dispatching career in Central Florida, in this small town called Frostproof.
Wow. Okay.
It's a real city, I swear.
Yeah.
It's called Frostproof.
That's funny.
And I started my career there. And when I left Florida, I moved back home to Southwest Michigan, finished off my career in the Central Dispatch, the county that I grew up in, which is Allegan. And one of the calls that I ended up taking, which really kind of pushed what I was doing with sharing my stories, was when my grandmother passed away, I took that call.
Oh my gosh.
And
wow.
Yeah, it was not something that what are the odds, right? What are the odds that something like that's going to happen? So when I'm a firm believer that, especially in dispatch, and maybe it's the same way out, in the field for the other responders and such, but I feel like there are calls that are meant for us,
right?
Because we might have a certain experience that others wouldn't have. Not that they wouldn't do a good job,
right?
But I have a certain experience that they don't, where I would be able to help that caller better. So with this scenario, the situation, I'm sitting in dispatch. My grandmother at the time is staying with my aunt, and all of my family were there at my aunt's house, and she was in hospice care. So we knew that she was getting close. Yeah. And it had already been decided that if she passed away while I was in dispatch, that I would be able to leave. Now, I'm on backup phones and backup radios. So I'm not really taking a lot of those calls. This was about 3 a.m. or so. And my partner ends up saying to me, hey, Ricky, I'm going to get up to go to the kitchen really quick to get something. Is it okay? And I said, of course, there's nothing going on anyway. Which is basically tempting fate, right? Yeah. You're tempting fate there. So,
gee, it sure is quiet tonight. Kill the new guy.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And so she goes to leave, and no sooner did the door shut, but the phone rings. And the hair, I'm getting goosebumps now just talking about it, but the hair in the back of my neck stood up. And the old phone system that we had then, this is 2007, I believe.
Oh, wow. Dark ages.
If you waited one ring, if you waited for one ring, the information would pop up on the screen. But if you just, went ahead and picked up or whatever, you had to wait that like half a ring before the information popped up. Again, it was an older system from like the mid to late 90s, and they don't have it there anymore.
Right. Thank
but
goodness.
that's what was there at the time. So I waited that half ring, and I never hesitate to pick up the phone, but something just instantly felt different, something in my gut. And I looked up at the screen, and it was my mom's cell phone number.
Oh, wow.
And I pick up the phone, and I said, Allegan 911, where's your emergency? And it was my cousin. And she says, Richie? And I said, yeah. And she goes, Grandma just died. And I went through the motions, right? I did what I had to do, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, what are the odds that this was going to happen? And that it would be me? Now, it was actually kind of poetic in a sense, because my grandmother lived with my parents before my siblings and I were born. So she was literally there for me in the beginning, and I was there for her in the end. So
still tough.
You've got, right. Yeah. And my grandmother was a great storyteller. And I feel like she left me with that story, this connection that we had, and everything that I do today. So everything came from all of these moments of my experience. That's how all of this started.
Wow. Very cool. Very, very good story, bro.
Thank you.
I am very much a fan of everything you're doing, man. First of all, I want to mention that you have a book that's been published not that long ago called Imagine Listening that you read yourself. And I haven't gotten it, but I intend to, because the Imagine Listening sessions in the podcast episodes are absolutely awesome. There's so much power in telling I stories. And your whole thing is about I stories. When you interviewed Kelly, that's what you got down to, was her telling stories. And I think the power of storytelling, when it's first person, this is what I went through, this is what I'm feeling, this is my experience, becomes extra powerful. And it helps others listening to formulate their own I story. I had a dissertation I participated in, another student when I was in graduate school. And his whole experimentation was put me and the rest of us in a room, and we're supposed to just tell an I story. And the person listening across from us was then taken to another room after the I story was done, and, okay, what'd you think? And they immediately started to tell an I story. It's contagious. And so when I hear your Imagine Listening sessions, I'm thinking the book must be incredible, for starters. That you got to read it yourself is just awesome. So I want to make sure people know. You can listen to the episodes, you can buy the man's books. All his shit is really good. And it's emotional, it's intense, it's personal. There's like, you just listen to it and let it hit you, because it's going to hit you. It's going to affect you. It's going to make provoke your emotions, going to provoke your thought. It's powerful stuff, Ricardo, and I have a great admiration for it. I also want to share that you have a media network.
Yeah.
And a podcast network. And you have the Imagine Within the Trenches podcast. And then you have these things that I got real happy, enjoyed. Oh, so entertaining. Your open mic episodes, which are on Instagram Live, and you got people, texting you during the process. My goodness, is that fun. I listened to a couple of those start to finish without interruption. They're very entertaining, sir. So I want to congratulate you on all of this that you've put together in 10 or 15 years. It's a formidable body of work, bro. And you're still kicking ass.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And
thank you.
And I got to tell you, man, I got really into watching your face. I would mute you, and I would just watch your face. I think 90% of all communication is nonverbal, so I do this with everybody. If I want to hear you, I turn you off. And I just watch your behavior.
That's funny.
Dude, after an hour of open mic or whatever, I'm thinking, Ricardo Martinez II is the happiest son of a bitch I have ever met. That guy's smile is just infectious and real. And there's so much to me for like Mark and the rest of our team and the other folks that we've had the privilege of spending time with. You come through all this shit. I mean, and it affects every part of your life, your body, your mind, your spirit, your family, your friends, your past, your future, all this shit. And you're happy. And I'm sitting across from Mark. I know he's happy. We're all working on shit. We all got stuff to do. But dude, you strike me as a genuinely happy man. True?
I appreciate that, man. I really do. I just love laughter. Like that's why I have that tagline on open mic, which I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of like my design I bring from my childhood, like things that I loved. So for example, the logo that I have for open mic is a nod to G.I. Joe, to the cartoon of G.I. Joe, because and the tagline is because laughter is good medicine, but
right.
But G.I. Joe's is, what was it? Because knowing is half the battle, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I like to find the funny in a lot of life, because man, there's so much sad and so much horrific shit that is going on in the world, but also in public safety.
Oh yeah.
But there's a lot of rewarding parts of it as well. You know, when I first started the I Am 911 movement, there were folks that did not like it because they were saying, you're going to scare people and we need people.
Oh,
and
wait. Push balls. I'm sorry. So I'm assuming these are managers that are saying, don't do this because you're going to scare off recruitment.
Pretty much. Yeah.
All right. Well, fuck them. So let me ask you a question. I don't mean to slow your roll here, but my ADHD mind is rolling right now. I always prided myself because I always tried to have a good relationship with my dispatchers. I was a sergeant for 30 years. I wasn't always a sergeant, but I also knew that there were two sides of the microphone. And I made friends with some of our dispatchers. Here in Miami County, Ohio, we are centrally dispatched. So we went from, each police department had its own dispatch till like 5 o'clock, and then the sheriff's department did it. But anyway, they wisely did a central dispatch. So I always tried to, put faces with the names and to have them, just try and follow up on calls. Or if I was a real asshole over the radio, I would say, hey, man, I'm sorry. The tone came out wrong. The inflection was wrong. Or I was a dick, and I just want to say I'm sorry, because I had that empathy for my dispatchers. And I know off mic, they're like, fuck that motherfucker. But, I didn't want to have that animosity going back and forth.
Right.
So I always wanted to do that. So in this thing that if you're telling the real stories of what the job is about, and don't do that because we're afraid you might run somebody off. Well, that person was never meant to be in dispatch. And if that person's like, I want to try it because it's going to be fun. No, this isn't a fun job. You do this. This is a service-oriented job. Just like being a police officer, firefighter, EMT, corrections. We're all part of the flag, right? So we like to say we have our own stripe on the flag. But I always felt that dispatch was kind of the unsung heroes because you guys were always the first one to take the call, but you never heard the conclusion. And that's dawned on me one day that, the officers are there and we start CPR and they always want to know, did the guy survive? And I always would make an effort on the big ones or the gory ones to call them or to go up and see them and say, hey, yeah, good work. We all work together. We saved this person's life. Or, my CPR record is standing. I kill everybody I put hands on. But that's a joke. My dark humor coming through. But there has been some successes out there. But
yeah.
They always like to know what the conclusion was or what happened to that asshole once you guys got there, like on the domestic call or whatever else. So I think that was a poor manager decision to say, no, we don't want to do this. But on the other side of the story, why did I want to become a cop? And I wanted to become a cop because I grew up watching Adam 12. I grew up watching Chips, or Cops on Saturday night. I'm like, man, that looks like a lot of effing fun, so I want to do this, seeing Gary and Mel out there, get on it, Mel, woo, if you ever seen that video. But, that's the shit I wanted to do. So that crazy stuff didn't push me off any. But with your show, I mean, you do just such a great job, and now I see where you got all the cool graphics. So that all makes sense now, because I was admiring some of your work when I was doing some research on your show. I'm thinking, oh, he's doing graphic arts. All right, so he's got his own gig going on.
Yeah.
So well done again there, sir. So please continue. If you're still in the same thought process, I didn't mean to derail.
Yeah.
But please.
No, not at all. So I think the reason for that was because people didn't fully understand what everything was that I was doing or how it could help, because these were not just like directors and such, and there were a very few, and it was mostly on the West Coast. But on the West Coast, there was a couple training companies that were saying similar things, and people who were working for them were telling me this. They were really good friends, and I said, well, what do you think about that? And they said, well, I think it's bullshit, because what you're doing is a good thing. And I said, okay, well, don't tell your boss that, because you're going to get fired.
Right.
And but I'm glad to know that you're on the same side, because this is a good thing. And actually, what ended up happening was the complete opposite of what these people thought. So many people were sharing their stories and opening up. And not just that, people were emailing and saying, I just want you to know that these stories, everything that you're posting out there, this is the reason that I wanted to become a 911 professional, because I wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself.
Boom.
I wanted to help.
Yes.
And
there
so
it is.
I started putting that stuff out there, and people started to change what they were thinking, and they started using it. A good friend of mine who's a director out of Kansas, state of Kansas, she ended up at her county. They created a recruitment video using the I Am 911 movement, saying, showing, dispatch taking a call. And showing, an actual, incident. And it's, I was there when you were having a heart attack, and I was talking to your kids or something like that. And they showed, a dramatization of that happening, but also the dispatcher standing over them, like I was there with you.
Wow.
And they were saying, do you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself? Come and join us. And they ended up getting a lot of people from that. So it was nice to be able to see that those folks out there just didn't know. They didn't know how to use it. But a lot of times too, people are afraid of what they don't know.
Yes. Oh,
and
amen,
some of these
brother.
stories.
Amen.
Yeah. Right.
God.
There's the fear of the unknown.
Right.
And just because they didn't know how to use it, because some of the stories were controversial. I mean, some of the stories are pretty hard, man.
Oh, I know.
But they're,
bro, you with your work, I love the fact that you do the PTSD warning up front. If you are suffering from PTS, don't listen to this shit, because you are going to get it. And I heard that you did that. What's the episode number again, David?
510.
510.
Yeah.
You did that. And I'm like, whatever. I'm a big, tough sergeant. I can handle anything. Yeah. Within 10 minutes, I'm out there. I'm booing away. My wife comes out. She's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And I'm like, I got to shut this off. So,
like, I need to go sit by myself somewhere.
Well, but God bless you and the dispatch professionals that are willing to get vulnerable and get out there on the air and share that fucking story. And this is what we go through as first responders. And with that attitude or that mindset that I was there with your loved one while this was going on. And, I did a shit ton of death notifications. And what I always told my junior officers, look, don't be a fucking asshole when you go there. You are the key player in this person's worst fucking day. This is trauma that you're imprinting on their head, and they will remember this for the rest of their life. So be kind, be respectful, treat them like a relative that you like. Because just like with the people that's on at the comm center on dispatch, they're trained to do that. Answer the questions. I know they just want to scream, and I think it's learned behavior. Just get the whatever address, and we'll tell you when you get here. No, bro, it don't work that way.
Right.
There's protocols that you guys got to get through to get what proper emergency service. So a cop isn't just going to show up who perhaps isn't trained in CPR or firefighting or whatever else. I can tell you a bunch of fucking house fires I've been to with this little 20-pound fire extinguisher, I ain't doing shit.
Right. Yeah.
We need a ladder and a couple 100,000 gallons of water here. I'm not going to do you any good.
Right.
So that's
exactly.
where, so anyway, I didn't mean to jump in there, but the work that you're doing with your podcast and the emotions that you're bringing out of people, good work, man. Fucking salute.
Absolutely.
You have my
I appreciate it. Thank you.
It's great work. Great work.
I really do appreciate it. I knew that I really had something going, especially when, when the blogs were going out there and people were emailing saying, I was in, and this was from a friend of mine in high school. He lives in Hawaii now, but he had sent me an email and he goes, "Hey man," he goes, "I just wanted to I wanted to share this story with you." And I said, "Okay, what's going on?" And he says, "I was in just a minor fender bender recently, and I called 911 and they put me on hold." He goes, "And I was so pissed off. And it was really because I didn't know what you all do. And from reading what you do, now I know, and I won't be like that again. So I just wanted to say thank you for educating me." And I thought, oh shit, like,
right.
All right, well, this is good.
Yeah.
And when the podcast came out, I think it was just episode. I had only had 3 episodes out already, and a deputy that I was working with, a real hard ass former active Marine, he sent me a message. Coolest freaking guy, man, but a real hard ass as well. He sent me an MCT message, and I just it popped up, and I looked over and I was like, "Oh, what's this? What is he sending me here?" This is out of nowhere. He's not on a call or anything.
Right.
And he says, "Hey, man," he goes, "I just wanted you to know that I have learned more about dispatch in these first 3 episodes of your show than the whole 20 some odd years that I've been working.
Yeah.
Don't stop. Keep doing it, because we need to know what this is about and what you guys are doing. That when you tell me to, so in Michigan, for NCIC checks and all that stuff, we call it lean in Michigan. So when they would say go to lean, we would say go to lean and stand by if it was busy. And a lot of times they thought that we were just like, fucking around, like, yeah, just go there. We'll get to you as soon as we can. No, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Right. You don't know what's happening.
Everyone's emergency is coming in.
That's right.
Right.
So
yeah.
Lean
and I just remember saying, don't stop.
I'm sorry, Ricardo. Lean is the channel you wanted them to go to, like a records channel. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Go to lean and stand by.
Just
okay.
So
with
go to lean and stand by.
Yeah, with us, we were essentially, so we switched. So the off channel or channel 2 is what we sent everybody over to. Everyone does something a little bit differently. So as I was understanding you at first, because we have leads, I'm sure they have leads up there as well, right? Which is
leads over here in Indiana.
System. Yeah, we have leads up there, or here in Ohio. Looking for your NCIC checks or whatever else. So we did everything over our computers in the car. So our dispatch director, along with our sheriff, had the great idea that we're going to go to silent dispatching. I'm like, well, that's the dumbest fucking thing I ever heard in my life. I don't know if you've done any Marc the Cop research, but I'm a driving instructor here for the state of Ohio, and if I'm running to a hot call, I need your eyes up and looking at the roadway and both hands on the wheel, not finger effing the keyboard and reading a screen while you're in a cruiser driving above the posted speed limit. So something's got to give. So I told my officers, fuck dispatch times then. You'll get there when you get there. Or if it's a hot call, get on the air and say, all right, does he currently have the weapon in hand? I need you to ask. And of course, the dispatchers are like, we're not allowed to tell you. And I'm like, okay, we have to find a means to an end here. So
that's interesting, because we would say everything. So I mean, in my center, there would be 3 of us on for the whole county. That was our minimum, was 3.
God.
And on the weekend it was 4. Yeah. So it doesn't seem.
I'm sorry.
I think it was like 150,000 maybe or something like that.
Yeah,
and a lot of
bro. You guys are running your ass off. Wow.
Oh yeah. When it would go to hell, it would go to hell. And if you're the only person on phones, you're not only taking the phone call, but you're also paging EMS or answering EMS or fire, and you're just doing everything all at once. Excuse me. And one of the things that made it even more interesting was if it was an open line, because now
that's worse.
your left ear is listening to the entire room with your right ear, depending on, where you're answering or whatever. But for me, on my right ear, I'm not only listening to whatever the caller is possibly doing, but the environment that caller is in.
Right.
So, I'm typing all of that stuff, listening. And if I'm still typing and I hear an officer yell something over, well, not yell over, but just say, do they have this or this? I'll yell it over to radio so that they can say it immediately while I'm still putting it into the narrative. So anything, like we would put it in there, but also if somebody was talking some crazy shit, I would type everything verbatim into the narrative.
Open mic.
So that,
wife says.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If anybody says it or whatever. Wow. And I remember someone saying to me, why did you put all of that stuff in there? And I said, well, it's exactly what they said. And also, if you guys go to court for it, you'll have everything.
Yeah,
so
you got it
I'm
all,
doing
bro.
my job.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, there's been some just goofy shit that people say. But, they're excited delirium. I mean, what spits out of their mouth when they're on the line with dispatch, it's like everything's recorded, guys. Everything's recorded. Even if they say stand by, for those of you out there listening, you're still being listened to. You're still being recorded. I had a guy one time.
Hot mic.
Yeah, every mic is hot. This guy, it was wintertime and it was a crash and of course they were being swamped and my dispatcher's like, sends me the dispatch. I'm on day, so my cell phone rings, so I answer it. And it's my dispatcher. And she's like, hey, can you do me a favor? And I said, what's that? She said, check that motherfucker up. And I went, whoa, what? Okay. Don't invite me to a good time. What'd he do?
I know,
like,
right?
He's motherfucking us while we got him on hold. And I said, yeah, all right. So I'm rolling my sleeves up. Here we go. I was a bulldog anyway. I was staying over from midnights to days. So I go handle the scene professionally. And this is for the days of body cams. And I said, come here, homie. I need to talk to you about something. He's like, what? And I said, just so you know, all that shit talk you were talking, while you thought you were on hold, they heard every word. And what I'm going to need you to do now is you need to call that dispatch center and give your sweetest, sugariest apology to those professionals that are working their fucking ass off right now. Because if you don't, guess what? And he said, what? I said, I got a disorderly conduct ticket here waiting on you. Inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm to a known in the presence of 2 or more people. Looks like there's 4 of us standing here. So you qualify, bro. I'll stand here and wait. He's like, yes. What do I call? I said 911. They'll answer, and you give your sweet sugar. And so he called up here, and the dispatcher's like, and the call taker's like, yeah. I yelled out, and I said, have her put it on speaker. And he did. He apologized. And we got done with the call.
That is amazing.
And I said, thank you, sir. I shook his hand. Be safe. Have a great day. Sorry you had a crash, blah, 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 and left. And my friend called me back. She's like, thank you so much for that. That was awesome. I'm like, yeah, fuck that guy.
Right. Yeah. There's people don't understand, man. There's a lot that goes into all of it.
Right.
Just listening to you say that, it just, if I may, really quick,
fire away.
I remember taking a call from this guy who was crazy intoxicated. Just crazy intoxicated.
Wait a minute, you're making this sound like a bad thing.
Sorry, I mean, everybody has fun, right? But this dude calls up and he's like, hey, dispatcher. And I went, that's how we're starting this call. Okay. And I said, how may I help you? and he goes, I need you to send an officer over here to my house. And I said, okay. I said, well, what's the location? Got all the important information and everything right off the bat. And I said, but what exactly is going on? Why do you need an officer to go out there? And he goes, you know what? I'm gonna do it in the voice that I remember hearing.
Oh, please do indulge.
Awesome. So yes, what I remember hearing was, so this is what was going on. Okay, I was at this bar, all right, and I spent all of this money, and they kicked me out because I was drunk. But what I want to do is I want the officer to come and give me a breathalyzer to prove I wasn't as drunk as they said. And in my head, I'm laughing like in my head, I'm thinking, what? This is one of those like dumb criminal stories.
Nice. Yeah.
So he called about 10 times, maybe it was. And it's just over and over and over. He's calling, and he's saying, "Dispatcher, if you've done your job yet, get them out here." And I'm like, "Dude, bro,
you've
like,
talked yourself
you're
into
you're gonna get in trouble, right?" And I said, "They're not going to go over there." And so I got a hold of one of the troopers, and because he was the only one that was available in that area, and I let him know what was going on, and he goes, "I'll tell you what. If he calls back one more time, just let me know, and we'll go and arrest him for abuse of 911.
Right.
And I said, okay. And a little bit of time had gone by, and then the phone rings again. I thought, damn it, here he is. And I pick up the phone, and he starts yelling at me. And again, dispatcher, are you going to send them out here? I'm still waiting. And I said, you know what, sir? I apologize. You're right. I should do my job, and I will do my job. I'm going to send someone to you. Because that's what we do here. We help people. So I'm going to send an officer out there. But let me ask you one last question before they head out there. And he goes, what's that, dispatcher? And I said, the bar that you were talking about, the bar in question, is at the very southern end of our county. And you live at the very north end of our county.
Oh, wow.
So here's my question. Did you drive yourself? And then there was silence. And then he goes, that's not the point here. And I said, okay, well, they're going to head out there. The officer's going to head out there to help you out. Okay. And he goes, all right, just let them know that I don't fuck around. And I said, okay. And I got off the phone with him, got the trooper on the horn, and we told him, and he's like heading out. And I said, have him go to the secondary channel so that I can say this over the radio. And he goes, okay. You know, he goes over, he's like, Central, I'm on secondary. And I said 10-4, I was like, just letting you know, the caller advised that he doesn't F around. He doesn't mess around. And the trooper goes, thank you. I'll keep that in mind when I get out there. They checked out. It was not even 5 minutes later.
Oh, wow.
And Central, we've got one in custody. We'll be en route. We'll be I think the code at that time for en route to the jail was 1066. So they're like, we're en route 66. And I was like, all right, cool. That trooper ended up typing up this letter of like commendation for me handling. They listened to every single call.
That's so
and they were
fabulous.
like, he held its own where I would have blown up. And I thought, because that's how I'm trained. That's what I'm supposed to do.
I'm a goddamn professional.
That's right. It's like, that's how we do it. And we got the guy. He was drunk driving too. So oh man.
Even though you're making home safe. There's a lot of people that do talk themselves into arrests.
Yes.
Right. So, I don't understand it sometimes.
Well, you know, when they're under the influence, you know, they get their mouth in gear, and you know, I can't tell you how many times I've told them, hey, you know, I'm just going to go ahead and start now with the warnings, because this will go from a minor misdemeanor disorderly conduct to an M4. So yeah, and that's really usually when I tell you to tone it down, and it's generally after I always did my job of the rules of baseball. You know, 3 strike. I always give them a warning, 2 second warning, 3rd warning. All right, here we go. Yeah, we're done. You've already been warned twice. One more, and it's go time. But, you know, I always tried to treat the people fair, even when they were fucked up. I mean, there was a guy one night that works at the local bar, and he was just belligerent, hammered, you know, fuck you. I'm like, Mike, another word, man, you're going. And he mouthed off again. I looked at one of my officers. Who needs it? I mean, I don't need stats. I'm a supervisor. So my one guy's like, I got him. Snatched him up, and the way it went, you know. So let's change gears a little bit here. While I have you on here, I write a column for the Tippecanoe Gazette, which is I'm also a columnist. Isn't that impressive, Dr. David? And we did we, being me and my mouse in my pocket, I did a story a while ago. Do you know who Paul Hicks is? Have you ever met him with Nina? He's an instructor with the Nina organization.
Probably, if I saw the person's face, I would probably know.
Probably. I'm assuming you did. I should have did a little homework and sent you some of that. Anyway, Paul's a good friend of mine. He was a former director of 911 in Clark County, Ohio. So he's since retired, and he works for Nina now. So we did an article in the paper, which my editor said, man, this thing has just gotten massive feedback with the paper. So for the people listening, let's go over some do's and don'ts when calling 911. So what's the number one, don't fucking do this. You see, we're rated explicit, so we can talk this way. Our show is anyway. But don't do this when you're calling 911. So go ahead, sir.
I mean, one of the things that I remember a lot of is that people would call 911 for parade times or fireworks times or trick-or-treating times. And I would tell friends and family this, and they would say, what? Why are people calling 911 for that? And I would say, yeah, exactly. And because I guess, you know, in a way, a lot of people, and this is not an excuse or anything, but I think a lot of it stems from the fact that people don't know like the non-emergency number. And it's more so because they don't want to look it up. Right.
Oh,
so
wow.
they just call 911. and what I would hear all the time, well, not all the time, but a lot of times was, this is not an emergency, but
Then hang it.
that would be the thing. This is not emergency, but, and I would tell them, okay, if this is an emergency, then I need to put you on hold because I have another emergency that I had to put on hold to get to you.
Right.
And there were a few times, man, I shit you not. There were a few times where people would say, okay, it is an emergency. I'm like, okay, tell me your emergency. What's your location? What's going on? And then it would turn out to be like, I'm going to miss, you know, this parade or whatever. And I just needed the times or something. And I would go, that is not an emergency. I'm going to put you on hold. You can call the non-emergency number that I'm going to give you right now, or just wait on hold. Let me finish this other one. And sometimes people would get pissed off. And I would say, look, I understand. There's somebody over on the other line that is going through a situation that is way more high stress and priority than what it is that you're going through. And I noticed that if you are just, real with those who are calling in, if you just, you know, don't pussyfoot around, don't beat around the bush, just be real without giving, you know, all the detail that gets you in trouble. But if you let them know what it is that you're doing and what it is that is going on, they'll understand and they'll be cool about it. Mm-hmm. But that's probably one of the biggest things is if you're calling 911, don't call 911 for parades times or fireworks times or anything like that. Pretty much everyone has a smartphone now. Yeah. You can easily Google it locally, ask a friend, send smoke signals or carrier pigeon or something. There are other ways, right, than tying up an emergency line. The other thing that I would say is know your location, know where you're at. Oh my
God, yes.
Because there's a lot of people that don't know where they are.
Wow.
And
isn't that amazing?
It's not, especially, you know, if you're been living in the area for a long time. I mean, you know some of those areas, you know your cross streets, know what landmarks are around you. And I know that it's easy to say now because in a high stress emergency situation, you're freaking out. You're looking all over the place. And like, I don't even know where I'm at. Right. And that's the first thing. But that would be, you know, those are like two of the main things, but also to answer the questions that are being asked, because the amount of questions that are being asked, like I said in the beginning, are not stopping or delaying any of that time. Mm-hmm. It's actually helping us to get the help there to you, not only faster, but also the right amount of assistance you might need. Because if we don't have all the information, let's just say it's a fire and there's like one truck going out and they get there and like, oh, you know what? We need more. So
it's fully involved.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. We need all of that information and just that cooperation and everything that, you know, sometimes we don't get, especially if somebody is screaming. And something that I learned early on when I very, very first started dispatching was this trick that they taught us, and it worked every time that I did it. But when someone is on the phone and they are just yelling and screaming, they're hysterical. Mm-hmm. If you raise your voice, if you try to go over them, it's not going to do anything. Right. You're basically like background noise. They know you're there because you're talking. They can hear you. Right. But they're still just vomiting of, you know, whatever incident they're going through. Now, now, if I bring my voice down to a whisper, it almost tricks them to think, is there anybody there anymore? Right. And every time I did that, the caller would stop and say, hello, is someone there? And that was my moment to jump in and get all the information that I needed to get.
So no, I'm here.
So
I just need you to come.
Yeah.
down.
So, right. But
I'm
those,
give you my FM radio voice.
In dispatch, you mentioned FM.
Yeah.
The officers would ask us, how the hell do you guys do what you do? And that would be our response. It's FM. And they would go, FM. And I said, yeah, Frank Mary, it's FM. And they said, I don't know what that means. And I would say, it's fucking magic. That's how we do it. Our whole team would say that. My supervisor was she started saying it first, and I had asked her too. I was like, what? And she goes, fucking magic. I was like, that's perfect. Let's use it. So you saying FM that made me think about that. But for do's and don'ts, man, just know your location.
Yes.
And that's probably the biggest thing, because there would be some times people would argue and say, well, what about my name or my phone number or whatever, getting that first. And I would say, you can give me that information, but if I don't know your location, where am I going to send them help to? Because if I try to call you back and let's say your battery is dead or you're fighting with someone and they destroyed your phone or there's no signal, how am I going to find you? That's why we need the location first.
Yes.
And then people would go, okay.
Well, that makes sense.
Thank you.
Have you done this before?
Right. Like, just a couple times,
Right. Well, and my thing is that most people don't think contingency. What if, what am I going to do if I come home and I find whoever laying in the floor? I guess being a first responder for all these years, walking into houses and seeing people, either laying there dead or incapacitated one way or the other, and they didn't have the wherewithal to be able to call and get that assistance to them. Or, basically sit down and talk to your kids. Be sure your kids know what your address is, what your phone number is, what mom and dad's name is.
Right.
Because that's all critical information. And, kids are so innocent anyway. Dr. David worked with children for a long time in his practice. But, and it's amazing to me how many people do not educate their children on what their current address is. Or you have a parent that's like a nomad that's moving like every 6 months. The kids are like, right. So you gotta get, and thank goodness we have triangulation now with a lot of the cell phone stores or cell phone capabilities, put it to you that way, to where you can get within, a couple of feet of where they are. But that takes time as well. And, in an emergency, let's get everyone there that can be there. So it's 911, which is emergencies, not 411, which is information. So don't call and ask for parade times or fireworks. It's all, if you just go to the city's website, all that shit's on there. But I agree with Ricardo that they're just too lazy. What's called 911? They're the government. No, they aren't. They're there dispatching. And as he just said, there's 3 of you. There's 150,000 of you. So there's 3 dispatchers to 150,000. So how do you think this ratio is going to go? So if we have just 100 of you calling in with bullshit, that's 100 calls to where the heart attack victim can't get the help. So, call wisely, choose
it's
wisely.
FM.
Yes, fucking magic. So let's talk about this next generation 911 stuff here that has been coming along. Can you talk about that a little more or have any knowledge on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that have been happening since the time that I was getting ready to leave dispatch to present time. So, one of the big things towards the end of my dispatch career was VoIP calls. Voice over Internet Protocol is what it stands for. Okay. And, you had companies like Vonage and all these other people who were doing these commercials for, this new phone service that was coming out. The hard thing, though, at that time was that one of the things that they weren't telling these people, even though it was, inexpensive and they had all of these minutes and there was all of this other stuff that they could do, one thing that people didn't know was that if you move your information doesn't follow you. It's not, it's not like, right. It's not like when you have a hard line at home and it's connected directly to that address, which was always awesome. Right. Yeah. But then cell phones come in and everything is different. You know, location is crazy. You've got what's known as wireless phase 1, which is just off the tower. And there's between 3 to 12 mile radius of where you could possibly be. So again, know your location, because there's still areas out there that don't have the greatest coverage. And then, as you were mentioning, the triangulation there with wireless phase 2, it makes it way better. But even with that, back then, when I was in dispatch, it wasn't the greatest either, because we would have to send a fax to one of the cell phone carriers to try to get the location or a better location through them. So there's all of this time that's going by, and right. And to be like, for me, it sucks so bad, because that mental health aspect of it, not knowing if someone calls on one of those phones that doesn't have service, and it's an NSI phone, non-service initialized phone. If it doesn't have service, it's still by law can call 911.
Right.
But the location and stuff really didn't work. So you could have an open line with someone and you're listening to the most horrific shit going on, and you know this person needs help, but there's no address, there's no location, and you're waiting for that fax to come in or whatever from that carrier, and then they end up telling you, this is the best that we have, and then you lose that call, and they never call back. So then you're left wondering, what could I have done different? Could I have said something different? You start blaming yourself, and you go home with this such a horrible feeling, like there was nothing else I could do except to pray that that person is okay.
Right.
So it was things like that that really sucked with the technology that was going on at that time. But kind of going back to the VoIP calls and stuff, there was a lot of stuff that we had to do to prepare for all of that, because there were a lot of people. I mean, I remember taking a domestic violence call once, and it was an in-progress one, and I'm going off the address. I verified the address with the person twice, and going through everything, the officers were almost there. And I don't know what happened with my caller, but when I asked another time, just for the cross streets again, just to make sure, the person goes, wait a minute, what address did you say? And I said, the same one I just asked you about a couple times. Is this not the right one? And they said, no, they were 2 townships away from where the officers were about to check out at that address. Right. So now they have to whip around to go to that house. Luckily, even though it was an in-progress domestic, there was no weapons involved. It was verbal. It hadn't gotten physical yet. I'm trying to keep them separated, right? But I'm a voice.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be that voice of authority within the trenches of 911 there, and trying to keep them separated, which luckily I was able to do. But I remember the officers calling up and saying, bro, what happened? And I explained to them, and I remember them saying, this is going to be bad if people don't know that. So I'm pretty sure it was in the news that they were starting to say, you need to make sure to let the provider know that if you move, that they got to change that, because it's the same phone number, right? But it's also the same address.
Yeah.
So
update your
there was those things. Right. So now, you fast forward. When I left dispatch in 2013, text for 911 was starting to come out, and people were freaking out because they were saying it's going to be so busy that we're going to need to hire more people, all of these different things. But what it turned out was it ended up not being as bad as what people thought, which was definitely a good thing, because for the public education that was going out there, the way, at least in Indiana, and what ended up spreading out everywhere else, the company that I worked for in the private sector of 911, they had created a 911 a program, or a text 911 program rather, some software that dispatchers could use. So the entire state of Indiana, since 2013, you've been able to text 911. Wow. And they had it working through, but the reason it didn't end up being as busy as what people thought was because the state of Indiana was putting public education out there to everyone, saying this is a last resort thing.
Right.
If you can't get through on the phone, or you're in a situation where you're hiding and you don't want to call so that you can't, people can't hear you, text. You can actually text. And because of that, the dispatch centers weren't completely overrun by crazy text messages or pranksters or whatever, because people knew that it was a last resort thing to be able to use. Now, from there, you end up getting into more location accuracy with companies like Rapid SOS, Rapid Deploy, and all of these others, where now when you're getting these phone calls and you don't have a location, you've got this software that can pinpoint almost exactly where they're at. And now it's even more advanced, where you can do it from the Z axis to see what floor, like the elevation of where exactly they might be in a building. So it has completely just exploded with technology now, which is great, because a lot of people would say, how come DoorDash or, Papa John's or whatever can find me like that, or Uber or whatever, but 911 can't?
It's because
and then you have to go. Exactly. Yes. It's because you say yes right away. Yeah. As soon as you download that app and you say yes, because you don't want to read it, you just want to get through, you have given permission for your privacy to be gone. And with 911, it's a little different. Yeah. It's not like that. It's not that easy. And so things have completely progressed with all of these different companies, to where, for me, especially because video to 911 is also coming in, and there's centers out there that are using it. I mean, there's also AI that people are using in some centers for non-emergency calls, to be able to just kind of take those and put them in the queue for people to take care of by a phone call, or however they're doing it. There's no AI for emergency calls. Right. There's that. So please, anybody listening to this right now, it's not for that yet. And there's only a few centers that are utilizing AI for some of those non-emergency calls. But the location accuracy, the text to 911, picture to 911, video to 911, those things are going on right now. And I personally feel that with the video to 911, pictures and such like that, where I told you that story in the beginning, where I didn't know now what happened to someone and it was destroying, my mental health and wellness, being able to see certain things, if you choose to rather, because these companies have it blurred. So you can take the video, but it's blurred first. Yeah. And then you can choose to see it if you want to, which I think is great. These companies are reaching out to dispatch centers and saying, how do you want to see this? Which I think is phenomenal, because who better than us to work with them, right? To know how to deploy these things. But being able to see these things, or whichever, I feel like is going to help a lot with the closure aspect, because in a sense, now we're going to know. I mean, we have to get some of this funding and everything passed, so that there can be a lot more education, a lot more resources for mental health and wellness for everyone in public safety who are dealing with this. Right. But especially in dispatch, where, right now in DC, currently was February 26th. Right now is the start of the 911 Goes to Washington conference that the National Emergency Number Association puts on every year. So they're out there right now talking to reps to get certain things passed, not just for the NG911 fund, but for 911 dispatchers to actually be classified, or reclassified rather, into the protective class, versus what they're in right now is the clerical class, with commercial dispatchers, clerical workers, and administrators and such like that. Yeah, not the
same horse there as an emergency.
No.
A 911 dispatcher is not the same thing as the, Ethel down here that's typing up, balance sheets for the day. It's totally not the same thing.
Right.
But that's the problem is that we're kind of a victim of circumstance, meaning, the people, the ways of the past are darkening the ways of the future. And, That's why I wanted to talk about that new active 911. How are you filtering all this information into the centers, which we have now? And I think it's great you said, well, how does DoorDash find me so quick? Well, because you want your damn food, because you're answering all the questions right up front. You don't do that with your dispatch center. For example, you didn't update your fucking address when you moved, did you? No. How many people that I stop and their driver's license is out of date? Are you still at whatever? Oh, I haven't lived there in 2 years. Really? Well, let's go ahead and see if you're valid, because odds are they probably got a random compliance and they're under suspension. Ding-a-ling. But, people just don't update. Like here in Ohio with Ohio BMV, you can go online and fix all that shit. You don't have to go to the BMV. Just go online and do it. But, 911 isn't this magic entity. And then we get the CSI factor coming in where, wow, we can find you in a heartbeat. No, don't work that way. Have a little bit of self-initiation. And it's like I was talking about. When there is an emergency, think beyond the end of your nose, folks. When that emergency comes in, have that address updated. Have your driver's license updated. Have you contacted your carrier and said, hey, I've moved? I know you did a forwarding address, or else you're not getting your bills. Or some people just pay them all online, so they may not have that. Have that wherewithal to think, what's the next step, and how are we going to get there ahead of time? Dr. David,
exactly.
I've been yammering on. You haven't had the mic much, so go ahead.
I love listening to all of it, bro. I'm good. I have to say, it's striking me both when watching and listening, and then this morning. Wow, dispatchers are invisible. Everybody sees policemen, firemen, paramedics. Nobody ever sees a dispatcher. You guys are invisible. So one of my things I'm very curious about, and this is like, use Mark's frame, past and present, in terms of training. When, where, how did you get your training, and how different is it today? And then in your training, did anybody bring up the phrase mental health to you?
Good question.
So let's get in our DeLoreans and go back in time.
Good, man.
Well,
yeah.
We do have Doc here.
Yes.
Looks similar.
That was great. So we'll go back to 2001 when I very first started out in dispatch. And when I went in, I had no previous experience. And the only experience I had was Rescue 911 with William Shatner.
Oh yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Favorite show, man. One of my favorite shows growing up. And at the end of pretty much every episode, dispatch gets to meet the people that they helped out. And I thought, well, maybe it'll be like that. No, it's not like that. That doesn't always happen. No. Yeah. So I'm at home, and because when I left Michigan originally, I went to go visit my mom and my grandmother and my sisters. It was only going to be for a couple of weeks because I had what I felt like just kind of hit a rock bottom. And I'm a firm believer that when you hit whatever version of rock bottom it is for you personally, that's when you know what you're made of, because you start clawing, right? You start clawing back to get to the top or wherever it was that you were or where you want to be. And so I needed to switch. And I thought, well, I'll go there for a couple of weeks and just try to figure that out. Well, about a month passed, and my mom says, "Do you think you should probably get a job? Because I don't think you're going. I don't think you're going to be going back to Michigan." And I remember laughing, and I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go. Go look." At that time, I only had retail management experience. I was 19, and I had already managed 2 different stores. One of them being a Blockbuster.
Oh wow! There you go.
Yeah, awesome. Exactly. So that's what I was looking for. This was Polk County, Florida, and one of the coolest sheriffs, Sheriff Grady Judd, is out of Polk County. Oh yeah,
we love Sheriff Grady.
Yes, yeah.
Why'd you only shoot him 67 times? Because that's all the bullets we had.
Right, yes.
That was my best quote he's ever made.
He is a character, man. And I got a chance to interview him for the podcast, and it was so fun. Yes. But I'm looking for jobs there in Polk County, and there's nothing that I can find. And my mom says, your cousin's husband knows the chief of police there in Frostproof, and they were talking and they were saying that they were hiring dispatchers. Maybe you should go try. And I said, all right, what do I have to lose? So I go in there, I fill out my application, and I end up getting a call back. I go and I do my interview, but then I don't hear from them for like 2 months.
Yeah, typical public service.
Right. I thought I screwed the pooch, man. I was like, oh man, I screwed that up. And my grandmother comes into my room. I was dozing off. I was going to take a nap, I guess. And she runs in. She only speaks Spanish, and she's yelling at me in Spanish, saying, "The police are here. The police are here. What did you do?" And I said, I didn't. I mean, I was with my cousins last night, but I don't think I did anything. So I'll go check. And she's like, "Yeah, you better get your ass out there." Excuse me, and check it out. So I go out there, and it's the chief of police, because I only live down the road from the police department. And it's a small town. There's like 2 traffic lights and a McDonald's and a grocery store.
Oh, wow.
It's a small town. So I walk out and I said, "Chief, hey, how's it going?" And he says, "Well, I just wanted to come by and see if you wanted the job." And I said, "Well, of course. Yeah. I thought I messed up in the interview. I haven't heard from you guys." And he goes, "It's a long background process, but we like you. We want you to come in." Now, I was thinking, because it's a new job, I'm going to start next week. And I asked that, and he goes, "No, you start tonight." And I thought he was joking, and I laughed, and I said, "No, really?" And he goes,
"Midnight dispatcher ain't showing up. We need you to come to work."
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we just lost somebody. No, he says, "You want the job, don't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I do want the job." And I said, "I just thought, like any job, typically I would start the following week or something." He goes, "No, you start tonight." And he's like, "Get your nap in, because you're working from 10p to 6a. And I said, "Okay." So I go in that first night, man, and my
who does
that police department that police department does that. And which they were the coolest, man. I got my start there, and I will never forget it. But I walk in that night, and I met my trainer, who I will just simply say was a very seasoned 911 dispatcher.
Okay.
And he'd been there for a while. And he was the coolest guy. His first name was Harry. And he showed me everything that was in there. And 911 goes off. And I'm watching him like I'm watching National Geographic or something. Like, I'm just in awe of what is happening, because I've never been on this side before.
Right.
And when he's done, I almost like I was applauding him. I said, "Well done. That was great." And he goes, "Oh, well, good. You're next." What?
Next one's yours,
now,
bro.
Again, just like the chief, I thought this dude was joking. And I said, "Harry, are you serious?" And he just like dead, just looking at me. "Yeah, you're next.
You're up, big boy."
And I remember going like this to him. Yes, exactly. Yes. I said, "Hold on. I mean, there's nothing else to this?" I said, "There's no other training. Are you kidding me?" And he goes, "Listen, the only way you're going to learn how to do this is by doing it. You learn on the job by taking call after call and working all of these incidents." He goes, "Basically what it takes to do this is you need common sense, you need to have thick skin, and you have to be human." And that has always stuck with me. It's that human part, especially.
The human, number one.
And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm sitting there sweating, like literally sweat on, like down my back, waiting for this call to come in, because I was going to be next. Dude, I was freaking out, man. And then finally the phone rings. It's my turn. Frostproof 911. Where's your emergency? And it was a butt dial. So that was a nice way to introduce me, like bring me in. Right. Yeah. But that was my first night. Luckily, the following week, the following week, I did have a 40-hour beginners dispatching course where they taught us about techniques and all this other stuff. Now, during that time, they talked to us about hard calls that we would be taking, but I don't ever remember them talking about mental health and wellness to the point of, these are some resources. This is what you can do to help you. That stuff wasn't talked about. Like you took the call and you went to the next one. One of the things that I do remember in that training, a couple of the things, like the main things, because there was a lot, right, that they taught us during those 40 hours. But the one about my voice, bringing it down to a whisper, that was one of them. The other thing was that when you're talking to people in a high stress situation, when you're asking for descriptions, they're simply going to tell you what they believe that they saw, not what is actually there. So to portray this, what they did, the instructor, he's telling us this part, and then there's a knock at the door. And this guy walks in and hands him something. He could have easily turned right back around and went out that same door. But no, what he did was he slowly walked around the entire class and was smiling and just kind of waving at people. And we're like, hi, what the hell? And then he leaves. And the instructor continues to talk about the same topic. And he goes, hold on, by the way, what was that guy wearing that just came in here? Ding. And we're like, oh, shit, this is part of the training. So, yeah, everyone starts trying to describe what the person was wearing, what they look like, if they had glasses or whatever. We were all wrong. So here's what it was that the guy handed the instructor. It was a freaking Polaroid. Someone took a picture of him standing there, everything that he was wearing, and that's what he handed the instructor to turn around to show us. Yeah. And we're like, oh. Yeah. So that's the training that I had when I very first started out in 2001. But when I ended up moving back home to Southwest Michigan and finished off my career in the Central Dispatch, there were 4 different phases of the training. It was completely different. Wow. Even the interview process was different because there was a test. There was like 100 questions and we had to finish it in an hour, and you could only miss like 3 or 4 or something like that. I missed one, and I'm still pissed off about that one because I knew in my gut what the answer was, but I second guessed it. And I went for an ask permission of the sergeant, and it was no, you just do what needs to be done and, bring them in afterwards or whatever. So I'll always kick myself for that one. But the training, rather, going in during that time in the Central Dispatch, the first phase was like geography and all of the different codes, all of everything that we had to memorize to make sure that we were as fast as possible, having those skills and the muscle memory. And then you start taking some of those non-emergency calls, but you're also listening to a lot of those emergency calls that are coming in as well. And you're hooked up to the umbilical cord with your trainer. Yes. And that second phase ends up being, lean or leads, whatever the, NCIC stuff, you're learning all of that. And then you go to radios, you go to dispatch radios. And I remember being on radios where I was so nervous that even if the answer was just 10-4, I was quickly looking over at my trainer to say, I need that just 10-4, right? Like, I needed to make sure. And they would, and I remember my trainer would say, look, just go ahead and say it. What you feel, just go ahead and say it. Right. If you're wrong, they're going to tell you you're wrong. And I'm like, that's what I'm trying to avoid. And she goes, there's no other way that you're going to learn. You need to learn. Yeah. And I was like, all right. So that's how, I got into it. And then that fourth phase was the shadow phase. So now we're all a team. The problem, though, with that training, and I think in some dispatch centers is still the same and could be part of the cause of the short staffing, is that there was nobody that was really talking to me. Oh, okay. And I get that you're supposed to be with your trainer, right? And they don't want others involved or messing up their training, which I understand that. I respect that. That's fine. But when you go into a place that, the center, any center out there boasts that you're a family. We're here as a family. We work as a team. But you come in and you don't really feel welcome. Nobody's talking to you or anything. Yeah. And you're like, okay, I almost quit.
This is
like I did. I almost quit.
Right, man,
right. Because I thought, how am I going to trust them if they don't seem like they trust me?
Right.
And then if we don't have this, how are we going to work with everybody else out in the field?
Right.
This is weird. So I ended up talking to the deputy director at the time, and because they brought me in, they said, "How is your training going?" And I went, "Oh, you really want to know? Let me tell you." And,
are you ready for some honesty?
Right. Yeah. And I straight up told them what was going on, because what was happening at the time is one trainer, or when I went to the next trainer, I was doing things the way the first trainer did it.
Right.
And I was getting marked down for it. And I said, why am I getting marked down for this? I'm doing it the right way.
Right.
And it was like, well, because you're not doing it my way, basically, is what it came down to.
Yeah.
Right. So then I end up talking to the deputy director, and things changed really fast. And I think I was the last one to go through that type. It's still done the same way, but with a different mindset, where if the person who is doing it figures out a way on their own that works the best for them and still gets the job done, then let's just go with it. Let's not be so close-minded or like a gatekeeper or whatever. Let's just do this and let it flow. And since that time, everything has been different. And even up until that time, there wasn't really talk about the mental health and wellness part of it.
Right.
It wasn't until, at least in my center, when I started sharing a lot of my stuff, that we all started really talking about it more and getting into our feelings
Right.
and sharing some of these pieces, because, then I would hear one of my coworkers telling me about a call that they took. And I would say, I took one like that the other day. Let me tell you what I did to try to get past that hard part. So then we were helping each other.
Right.
And morale, even though it was down at the time because of short staffing, it started going up, because now we truly had like a camaraderie that we were building there with each other.
You have that common ground.
Working like a well-oiled machine. Yes.
Yes, that's awesome.
I hope that answered your question thoroughly.
That's beautiful. That was beautiful. I loved every part of it. I just want to add one thing, like 01 is where you got your start, and then you had the training after you got your start. Hi, show up tonight, we'll train you next week. But now I know you move around the country, Ricardo, and see lots of different centers. Like, how is training now? Is it vary a lot from location to location, or is there any standardized training for a dispatcher?
So there are, with the National Emergency Number Association, NENA, or APCO that's out there, they have a lot of their standards, and there's a lot of different centers that go off of those standards, but they switch it up to fit their centers. But also in that same sense, let's just say Florida, for example, because of the Denise Amber Lee incident, now there's a lot of different things that you have to do for training. I mean, you have to actually be certified. There's academies out there that you go through. You have to have so many hours before you can actually get on the floor and do it. And in Michigan, they started doing that similar as well. It was a little bit after I was done with my dispatching career where they had put it out there. So now, if you are, let's just say you've got your own training company and you want to come into Michigan and teach at different centers, you have to submit all of that to the state so that they can approve it. And everything has to be very detailed. Takeaways, what people are going to get out of it, the amount of hours. And when you're doing the training, like, you can't stop like 15 minutes before and be like, all right, we finished early, go home. No, you get in trouble for that shit.
If it's an 8-hour day, it's an 8-hour day, guys.
Right. Yeah. Even if you're just like recapping stuff, it has to be, that the rest of that 8 hours, and you have to get in that time. So there are a lot of states that run it differently, where, like I said, in Florida and Michigan, you have to have a certain amount of hours, certification hours and everything, where here in Indiana, you don't have to have that, those certifications or anything, but things are changing all the time.
Right.
So there are standards that are out there. There are some centers that go by those standards. Some of them kind of just make it fit for their center. And then there's some states that there's a lot that goes into it, and you got to go to academies and all this other stuff. And, recently, I just saw this in the news just a couple of days ago. There is a city or an area in Colorado where the high school, they just introduced like a 911 dispatching course. So they've got a lot of those things to start them off in the beginning to start learning about this. But also to hear those calls.
And as public safety, some places have embraced it, some haven't. Like when the police side, they have the explorers. Just trying to kind of get the kids that's early on wanting to be interested in getting into law enforcement. Right. And I think that's great, especially for the dispatch side. Once you start recruiting there, here's a vocation where you can go out and do this instead of being, like I was. I was a part-time cop for a long time, because I had a full-time career, but I enjoyed that service and I enjoyed doing that work. And then I decided in my early 30s, hey, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and do this full-time. Whereas I wished that we would have started sooner. My wife always reminds me, hey, I told you 10 years ago you should have went full time. But like with the kids, I mean, you don't think about that when you first get in. What about retirement? This is a young person's game. Any public safety, doesn't matter what side of the microphone you are or what vocation you're in. Your body and your mental capabilities are only good. That acuity is only good for so long, and you really need to be a younger person in there. But I think that's absolutely awesome to start reaching out at the high school level and say, look, this is a challenging career, but also what you have with this is a decent pay, healthcare, retirement, so don't act like that, wow, it's just dispatch. And I can tell you there's, in my last academy class I taught, we had 2 or 3 former dispatchers in there going to be police officers. So, it can be a stepping stone into a different career phase, whatever that may be. It's just like with our correction officers. As soon as I start my lecture, who's my COs? Raise your hand. And 2 or 3 do. And I look at the rest of the class. I said, smartest motherfuckers in the room right there. And they're all like, whoa, they work in the jail. Yeah. But how long you been there? And, usually it's 2 or 3 years. I said, that's 2 or 3 years less that they have to work than you do. Some of them's 5 and 8 years. That's 2 or 3 years less to work than you do. My dispatcher, same way, I had one girl in the last class, was a dispatcher for 8 years. I said, that's 8 years less she has to work in public safety than the rest of you dudes do, where you can go ahead and get your pension. Not that it's the greatest in the world, but it's something. Yeah. And it's something you can rely on at the end of that 25-year career, depending on which way you're getting in. Yeah. Gentlemen, we are at an hour and 25 minutes. Can you believe that? Shit. This has flown. It doesn't even
feel like it was that long.
Yes. No, this has flown, man. I mean, I'm just going to tell Donnie, key the music up.
May your days and nights find you strong and safe. May you take your place as your family's face. As you do the shit that we won't do. As you embrace the risk you must go through, may you grow in strength and heal and find your heart, your soul, and your mind. You look at your life and grin. You have a home, the shield within.